Welcome to the fourth edition of the Ground Investigation podcast. My name is Michael Taylor. I'll be your host, and today we have Mark Lindahl from Bridgeway Consultancy on the show. How are you doing, Mark?
Yeah, not so bad. Thank you, Michael. Yourself?
Yeah, I'm doing fine. So how is life treating you in general at the moment?
Busy. It's very busy. Most people I speak to across the industry seems to be one way or the other. People are either really quiet or really busy. At the moment, we're absolutely stacked out, which is a good thing.
And do you think so? It seems to be coming to an end of some of the larger contracts, certainly for the sort of ground investigation stages. Do you think that's why some people are, a little bit shy of work, and some people have too much?
Maybe there's always a balance to be had in between chasing the mainline contracts, which everybody wants, and then, for want of a better term, mopping up behind them and taking the medium-sized contracts. Sometimes the smaller ones, if it's a value client, we're still not above the one day jobs. Quite happy to take any jobs. But there's always a risk if you chase that one main one and that remains your focus for a couple of years, where it's a long-term contract and you're not doing anything in the background to backfill when it comes to an end. Then you can find yourself with gaps, shall we say.
Nice big cliff edge to fall off if you relied on being fed, I suppose, by the larger hand. Once it stops, if you haven't done anything, I suppose you need to diversify, don't you? Really, you need the larger one, the smaller ones as well, contract wise.
Yeah, completely.
Yeah, exactly. So, could you just give us a little bit of a background on yourself, really, where you work, the role that you do at the moment, etc.
Yeah, no problem. Okay, so GI career began probably longer than I like to think ago, and it was by accident. If I'm honest, I started working life as a Royal Marine. Injury cut that short after a couple of years. I wasn't allowed to go back, so I ended up in the Royal Engineers. Originally down to be a surveyor of all things, and then
I've seen it. Went on. A contaminated land surveyor, is it? I think.
Yeah, that was part of it. That was one of the specialist qualifications. So originally, I would say I went in to be a standard surveyor, theodolite, laser scanning, things like that. Went on something called the design trades combined assessment, and it was found actually I was more suited to being wet, cold, and dirty by the side of a drilling rig than I was with with an instrument. So was trained on that with a good few other people that are in the industry now. 9 months original training, returned to unit for 18 months to get some experience, and then go back for advanced training. A few years later, ended up as an instructor teaching that, and then had to make a decision at 30, which is middle-aged if you're in green kit, whether to stay or whether to go. So made the decision to go. It was boom time. Took on by a company called Owen Williams Railways, who were long since departed and been swallowed up by bigger consultancies into rail. It wasn't a well thought out plan. They just stopped there.
Yeah, they never are they? It's kind of what happens. If you plan, it can give you some direction, but it's something else that crops up along the way. So you mentioned about being a sort of a Royal Engineer in the British Army. What kinds? I noticed on your LinkedIn profile, you've got Royal School of Military Engineering. Just what sort of qualifications and sort of learning did you do? By going through that.
Well, we were a bit unique, and we didn't really appreciate it at the time. So we used to scope our own investigations, drill our own investigations, do our own testing, and the lab that is in the Army at 530 STRE is UCAS accredited, the same as the others, but is actually the best scoring UCAS lab in the country with the most diverse portfolio. We then did our own reports, which fed into the design, and then we actually did the quality control afterwards for while it was being built. So what we didn't appreciate at the time was we were end to end, we were whole life cycle. It was a bit of a shock to me when I came out that once I'd drilled the hole and logged it, I never saw it again. But it was, to be honest, I don't believe there was a better foundation. It was a little bit annoying while we were on the course. It got downgraded from an HNC to an ONC, but that's not the end of the world.
No.
And then when I came out, I basically had to take a little bit of a step back, dropped into a technician's job till I could prove what I could do. 3 months later, I was made a project engineer. 3 months after that, project manager.
Yeah.
And then after a couple of years, was asked by a friend to go and do trackpad investigation for Scott Wilson, which, again, unfortunately, they're no longer with us. They're part of ACOM now. Spent 3 years running. Within a year that I went in as an operations manager, got moved up to senior operations manager and ran the contracts for a couple of years. In conjunction with the PM. On the other side, responsible for all the safety, quality, and resourcing of, you know, £28 million a year contract. Yeah. It was a big step up for me.
It sounds like a happy accident then to sort of go from, you know, going to the sort of military engineering. Sounds like you would have had some great training, some great discipline. So how do you think it's kind of, apart from the obvious qualification experience, how do you think it's helped you in your career so far?
Not a lot vexes me. Let's be honest. If something's not going right in Woking, I'm not in Iraq.
Yeah.
You know,
everything's got to be better.
Yeah, nobody's trying to shoot me while I'm doing a job. I don't know. We've been in Glasgow a couple of times with air rifles, but you know, in general, nothing that's going to seriously hurt you. Pressure, we're taught to deal with pressure from day one, and you know, I haven't done 9 operational tours. I'm used to pressure all the way around the world. Whether it was in a combat engineering role, whether it was in an infantry role, or whether it was in a technical role, didn't really matter. The discipline to get stuff done for clients, which has actually cost me people coming to work for us, because they'll say, you know, I wouldn't really want your life, because if I say that you'll have a quote by tomorrow morning at the start of business, and it means I have to send it at 3 o'clock in the morning, then that's what needs to be done. And because we operate primarily in rail, you know, stuff's on all night. I've got crews out every night of the week. So I think it gave me probably the best grounding. And the Army has a beautiful thing of, if any lesson that you teach, you should be able to teach it off the top of your head without notes. And you do an instructor's course. And anybody who goes into the instructor's course is the best of the junior NCOs across the board at the time. And not everybody passes. So everybody who passes and comes out the other side is a fantastic instructor. That's not blowing smoke up my own proverbial. That is across the board. Whether you're an infantryman, a signaller, an engineer, it doesn't matter. Everybody's got the same standard of being an instructor, and everybody's a really, really good instructor. I had 126 lessons in my lesson bank that I had to be able to teach. So it came as a big shock to me when I first came out as a senior tech, and I asked one of the grads to draw me some more circles. That it completely vexed her, and she was on it for hours. And I basically pulled out the lesson plan and sat and taught more circles to people that had way more qualifications than I did. Which I think was the eye opener for my boss at the time, going, all right, they know a little bit more than what we thought they did.
We have some people come to us, to be honest, especially people that have been, you know, doing sort of geotechnical drilling for the Army, and they're always popular with clients because of exactly what you said, you know, the discipline, the dedication, the hardships that they've gone through, which is their normal day-to-day job. So even something like drilling, it's, you know,
I've got a PhD in being wet, cold and dirty. It's from 17 to now. Definitely. Because I mean, most people go and get their degrees, don't they, and then start that route. But I mean, your route sounds a bit more adventurous. Sounds like the training is almost I'd say it would be better really to get you there as well. So hands-on experience, training, and adventure. What's not to like? What's not to like, really? And you know, I topped it up with a degree. I graduated at 35.
This is civil engineering degree.
Civil and infrastructure engineering. The only annoying thing was I couldn't get it done any faster, and I didn't particularly enjoy university life. I was a lot older, a lot more disciplined. I didn't take, you know, things like group work. When somebody's at university full time and I do it 1 day a week, if your stuff's not ready on the Thursday, guess what? I'm not going to be very pleased.
Yeah. So
I'm
you
fairly
went.
straight talking, and they found that out quite quickly.
I bet they did. So you started at 30, did you, at the university?
No, I did it in 14 months.
You did it in 14 months. I filled a degree in 14 months. That's exceptionally quick.
Yeah.
You must have been working
not
hard.
in comparison to the speed we learned stuff in the army. It was very slow.
Really?
I had to speak to them after a couple of weeks and say, I need to double up the modules. I can't go at this pace. It's too slow.
Okay. And did they facilitate that and just allow you to break through?
We had a deal that the first semester, if I didn't reach the required grades, then drop back to a normal timetable.
Yeah.
But there wasn't a problem.
Wasn't a problem. Were you working at this point? Were you still?
Yeah, I was running the track bed. Yeah, I was running the track bed team. Yeah. So I had 38 direct reports to me. Another 100 engineers, which I was responsible for their outputs for. 2 kids under 4, and I was going through a divorce. So when my lot say to me, I haven't had time to do that.
Yeah, you can. It sounds like you can tolerate a lot then, because that's a lot to tolerate at the same time. But yeah, no, I'm surprised that.
But mental resilience is all what every course I've ever been through is about.
Yeah.
Nothing lasts forever.
Mm-hmm.
You break sections down in your mind too. Right, in 8 weeks' time, this semester's over, so it's going to be bad for 8 weeks. Excuse me, I've got a couple of weeks respite. I know it's going to be bad again for a few more weeks.
Yeah,
it's okay.
That's it. So if you write it down, you accept it. All you need to do is get it done. It's something. I mean, when I went to university, it was a sitting there and get it done, and being motivated or disciplined enough to sit there and get it done, which was always hard. And I was a mature student as well, but I went full time, so it wasn't 1 day a week. There were differences, because I think I was 27, 28, and as everyone there sort of 18, 19, there's a world away, really. So on a Friday, on a Friday when everyone's kind of chilling out and making paper airplanes and throwing around the room, I'm like, I'm going. I'll see you.
That was my day in university Friday.
Yeah, that was the kind of mess around day. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
It was worth it though. I'm sure it was, definitely worth it for yourself.
You know what? After that, it was not long after I'd sort of finished, maybe 6 months afterwards. Mm-hmm. Pino was the owner of Bridgeway. His niece was on secondment to me at Scott Wilson. We were at a wedding. It was a big Italian wedding. It was a free bar, and I woke up the next day having accepted another job.
That's not so bad if you drank too much and only accepted a job.
Yeah, well, I bought a house in the same instance as well, where I didn't know I bought it the day after. Yeah, so it's I'll say one thing. Beer's been my downfall a few times, but
I could definitely say that a few times as well. So, so you became an investigation manager for Bridgeway Consultant in 2009. You sort of brought on to grow the investigation team there. So you managed to triple the turnover and double the team within the first financial year.
I mean, doubling the team was relatively easy because it was small. There was only 2 people.
So you doubled it to 4, but you tripled the turnover.
We didn't have any rigs. And I had sort of a deal with Pino. You give me 2 years and I'll have a department turning over £1 million a year. I just need some capital investment first, and I need to see what it does first. So I sat here for the first 3 weeks, because it was just before Christmas. Watched what went on, made some notes, and then the week before Christmas, sat the guys down. 2 full-timers and 2 part-timers, like 0 hours guys who, to be honest, just dug pits. They were P-way guys, really good at digging ballast, really good at digging pits, but that's what they were. And I just said, right, after Christmas, there's going to be some changes. We'll come to that in January. But the way that we work at the minute, it's not efficient. We don't have systems in place. We need to get them. Okay. So we started. I appointed. I went to speak to one of my best friends who had gone through training within the army. Everybody else in the country, everybody said to me when I left Scott Wilson, "You're mental. We're going into a recession. You're trying to start a team. What are you thinking of?" Well, anybody could do it while there's a boom. there's no challenge in that, is there? It's but my friend Hugh was at BWB. They were having a quiet time. He was on a 4-day week, so dragged him kicking and screaming into rail. He's very, very good at process things. So he took the reporting side of life, and the technical side of life. I took the operational side of life and bringing work in and training. And between us, we got going.
Yeah.
Got a good couple of contracts with some main consultants. Not big jobs, or 75, 80,000 pound jobs, but obviously, you know, when you start in, that's what you'll take anything, and we're taking the 1,500 quid. You know, 2 days of coring, anything that it was to get a brand out there, get people knowing that we did this for a living. And you know, we bought our first pair of dart rigs. 8 months later, we needed 2 more. 4 months after that, we needed 2 more, and we just started from there.
I'm very ambitious then. So when you said to was it the owner that you'd have it turning over $1 million, did they just believe you when you said that? Did they have, you know, were they a bit apprehensive? Yeah.
No, not really. There's no point setting unrealistic targets, Mark, or for want of a better term, pardon the French, trying to bullshit people.
Yeah.
I'm not a salesman. I'm well known for not being a salesman. Okay. I will give you confidence that I'll deliver your job for you, and I'll tell you what's possible and what's not possible. 99 times out of 100, I get it right. Sometimes I don't, and we have to take it on the chin.
Yeah.
Nobody's infallible. But, you know, there's other people, you know, you spoke to obviously Johnny Rogerman last time, as John will tell you, we're both straight up and straight down. I'll tell you, I've been doing this a long time. Yeah. Do I know everything? No, I don't. Because if I thought I knew everything, I'd be shrinking. I wouldn't be growing anymore. But I'm pretty good at what I do. I've got a niche market in rail. Everybody pretends to do rail. We're a principal contractor. We do rail. Okay. This is what we do for a living. And I've got, you know, I'll help people out as much as I can. I wrote the AGS guidance for working on rail. You know, John's had advice on me. Mark at CC will phone me up for advice. I've got friends, you know, we all rely on each other. We could compete for work, but we're still friends. We still help each other out.
Yeah.
So yeah, so you know, I said this is what I'll do. Just for want of a better term, just stay out of my way. You're not going to like everything I do, but just trust me, it's for a reason.
Yes.
And that's what we did. We set about. At the time we joined the BDA. We joined the AGS and set about training some staff. 6 months, 7 months in, I brought in the guy who's now my drilling manager. Again, I trained him in the army. There's a theme here, isn't there?
Yeah, turned out to be.
But he'd just done a tour as an instructor as well. We had all the training material, so we set about training our guys, not just training them in the drilling stuff, safety critical side of life for rail, so there could be a working unit, self-sufficient, don't need anybody else to get on and off to do what they need to do. And that's what we founded the model on, to be honest. And as we put in what seemed like quite a top-heavy structure at the time, but it was built so it could be bolted on underneath without really expanding the top part, certainly for the first sort of 3 years. And it was good. It was good. It worked. Then we brought in a couple of more engineers, not to do anything to do with the military. You know, the boss had said at the time, are you going to recruit anybody else, or are you just going to keep going back to green kit?
Okay.
And I said, no, we'll have a spread. So I brought a guy called John Duxbury. Great lad. Came in, he took over some of the technical stuff. Very clever man. Big bluff Yorkshireman, not always the most sociable of people. He won't mind me saying, sometimes the grads thought he was going to eat him. But again, I don't mind that much either. And we really set from there. We managed to hold sort of the management structure together for a good sort of 6 or 7 years before, really? Life took over as it does, and people either wanted a new challenge. John had to move back up north with his family. But it was a good time. It was a good time.
Okay. What's your kind of day-to-day activities? Do you have the same thing you do each day? I can't imagine you do. No one ever seems to do.
No, the one thing nobody ever tells you is when you're an engineer, when you're further down the higher you go, the less engineering you ever do. So every now and again I'll be pulled into that. Mostly business plans, quotations, tenders, dealing with staff issues, trying to recruit, trying to retain, trying to make sure the quality's still there, trying to get out on site to do audits. The normal stuff. Every now and again I'll pick a report up just to make sure that what's going out the door is what I'm happy with and things haven't been watered down. And I'll pay people to check that, but I'm still, every now and again, you should have one eyeball on everything that's going on in your business.
Yeah.
Keeping an eye on the commercials, keeping an eye on the market, looking at pipeline, looking at where we need to be for the next contract. So
how long did it take you? Did you just start to learn these things? Did you do any courses? Because obviously you have the qualification, experience and skills, in the sort of the civil engineering side of it. But when you started to do the processes and financials, etc., is that something that you learned a little bit in the army? Is it something you just threw yourself into when you started?
I'd say everything apart from the financials. I had no commercial experience before I went to Scott Wilson at all. At Scott Wilson, I make no bones about it, and other people say that I'm quite clever. I didn't realise that everybody's brain didn't work the same way for a long time.
Okay.
But I was given tools at Scott Wilson, and then came up with other processes. So I understood it.
Okay.
And then they became adopted across the department. For me, it was a simplified view of these very, very complicated spreadsheets. I didn't really understand why I had 72 columns when all I needed was 4.
Yeah. Okay.
So to write a secondary tab which gives you the calculations that you need, and have a summary on the front, so I can tell you at any point. So I started having to control the site work budget. We'd gone in and it was priced per location. Some of the sites, the way they were, I couldn't bring them in what we bid with.
Yeah.
But when I took a summary over the whole week, we were always in the green. And if they couldn't be, I'd be having a chat with the project director and say, right, we might need to start moving some of this work and start mixing it up with the sites there. So that was my first induction, and I did some internal training courses there. I've done further ones here. I've got hundreds of years worth of experience in this building. The business was founded by 3 guys when BR was privatized, and they had a lot of experience, and there was other people in here as well. I had an FD who at the time sat me down. He was another ex-squaddy back in the day, then had left and gone to university, and we sat down and we ran through. I said, what do you need from me? And what I need from you is I need a rate per person based on what I'm paying them. I know how long the activity is going to take. I know what productivity should be like. I can then break it down to get a quote together, but I need to understand what I'm paying as an overhead, what level of profit you want, what do you want me to apply to these people. And we had a day, we sat down there, and while we were doing it, I found the easiest way to do was put myself a sheet together, which had all these things in it, which again fed into a summary sheet. So, if I've got a driller and I'm employing him on the weekend and I need to charge him out £39 an hour to break even, I put the level of profit on it that we're after. The guys are getting paid double time. They're getting good shekels in the pocket for working for the Saturday night, but we still need to turn a profit. So it just gave me the first principles that I needed. We've since done leadership modules here. We have external consultants come in to do things with us. Again, if you think you're the finished product, you probably shouldn't be in the job that you're in. But it's an ongoing thing. I still do CPD. The rest of same as the other guys, I've got a CPD record that's up to date, because I don't know everything.
Yeah, of course. No one ever does, and no one ever will, I suppose, will they? There's too many things to learn, and when you learn the stuff, it changes and evolves and leaps forward a little bit anyway. So okay. So the next question was going to be, why did you kind of choose to get into ground investigation, civil engineering industry? But I suppose it wasn't your initial intention, was it?
No, my initial intention was to be a helicopter pilot.
Okay. Yeah.
So I went through the harshness of the commando course to get to where I wanted to be. And then that didn't work out for me.
Okay. But you got through the course.
I took a step back, and obviously then I had to, a year later, I had to repeat basic training again and go through it all again, and combat engineer training. And if I'm honest, when I went to the recruiting office, I said I'll join the parachute regiment, because that was my sort of thing. And it was basically, it was more of a, well, you could be an engineer. Oh, sorry, excuse me one sec.
That's right.
Yeah, it was more like, oh, you could be an engineer. And I had a friend who was in the engineers, who was at a unit called 9 Squadron, 9 Para. And the recruiting side said, I take it you've got you haven't got any qualifications. I said, I've got 10 GCSEs and 2 A levels. He said, I can't let you join the parachute regiment. He said, what about the engineers? And it was as simple as that, Michael. I'd love to say, I was 19 years old. I didn't have a clue what a 6'2", 14.5 stone aggressive lad was going to do for a living when his chosen career was taken out of the way.
Yeah.
But then I found I was actually quite good at building stuff, and I was quite good at the combat engineering stuff. And then when I went on to a trade course, it all came after the first few weeks. Nobody knows how to do a PSD test when you first start. You think, what the hell have I let myself in for?
Yeah.
And I was the only person who'd not done geography, so I didn't have any clue about geology whatsoever. Just sat like that going, is it not just soil? Don't know.
No.
I've done it in the garden.
Yeah, that's it. No mobile phone to scroll through and just quickly do a little bit of research. And
I had a Motorola flip phone that you could only send a 3-line text on and wouldn't fit in your pocket. It was too big.
Okay, but it did have Snake though, I bet.
No, it was even prior to that. It
Really?
wasn't the Nokia. No, it was pre-Snake.
Pre-Snake, pointless. You might as well throw in the bin. Right. So if there's anything that you could kind of click your fingers and overnight it would change something in the sort of the rail industry or civil engineering, what would it be and why?
At this moment in time, it would be to change people's expectations.
Yeah.
At the moment. And again, as a recruiter, I would imagine you might see this. People have no patience, Michael. I get people through the door from university, and 10 months later, they're telling me they're ready to be a PM.
Yes.
Yeah. And, if you are, you should be thick-skinned. You're not being told something as a personal attack. You're being told something to improve you, to make you better. My engineers have had a briefing off me this morning. Wasn't the nicest one ever, but every now and again, it needs doing. Standards had slipped a little bit, and I can't have that.
Okay.
But it was said with, this isn't designed as a personal attack to you guys. This is to make you better engineers.
Yeah.
We've had certainly more than one over the past couple of years that thought they were due for promoting, had been given a development plan, hadn't achieved the development plan, but wanted promoting anyway.
Okay.
And like, well, you can't actually do what I need you to do for that grade of staff. And, my grades are set out fairly rigid, because you have to be competent in the following things for me to be able to charge you on at that grade of staff. And if you're not, I can't. But rather than work towards it, they chose to leave.
Okay. And
which was churlish, to be honest.
Yeah, it can be short-sighted, can't it? You have to put in the groundwork, you have to have the experience, you have to have those problems that come up, and you have to resolve them in order to get better and put more in a tricky jar of experience, I suppose, don't you?
Yeah, I mean, we have a team ethos. I won't ask you to do anything I won't or can't do myself. And if you're stuck, more than one time I've swung out of bed at 1:30 on a Sunday morning, got in the car and had to go to site because things aren't going right.
Yeah, it's
okay. That's what I'm paid to do. This is the niche that I decided to carve for the team, that when we specialised in rail.
Yeah,
it's this is what we do. So if that's what it takes to make it successful, and that's what takes to happen, and I only ask, I've got a core of staff, Mark. Some have been here 10, 11 years with me now, and they know that. There's peaks and troughs within the industry. We could have carried on growing. We could have grown double during those first few years when everybody else was cutting people. But it was about having the right people. As we used to say, we wanted Mr. and Mrs. Right, not Mr. and Mrs. Right now.
Yeah.
And we'd rather take nobody than have the wrong people. But what we're seeing at the moment, the one thing I would just change is and my own daughters have it as well, and it's wounded me, is the fact that everybody wants everything immediately.
Yes.
And didn't want to put the groundwork in for it.
I think the thing is, so many things can be got immediately now, can't they? It's not in terms of work, but you know, in terms of the technology we have around us, generally make it, you know, instant. Even if you wait a few minutes now for a reply from you know, social media, you think, what's going on? Why are they not replying? It's been 3 minutes.
Yeah.
What's the problem? So yeah, it does start to train train your mind and expect things a bit quicker, I suppose, especially in the people just coming out of university, you know, just sort of starting or having a little bit of experience. I suppose they want to see extra rewards, even if they haven't attained what they had to, because they felt that they've been out getting wet, getting muddy, you know, all the social hours and everything else, and doesn't really work like that. If you can't charge them out at the higher rate, then you would make less money essentially. If you know.
Yeah. I mean, you know, we've spoken to them, and there's a couple who actually come back. You know, we all know what standard GI can be like. We're very regulated on hours they can work.
Okay.
You know, I know certainly from when I first left the army, and I was contracting in between my permanent job started. It was not unheard of to be getting in my car at 4 o'clock in the morning to drive to the south coast to do 8 hours logging by the side of a CP rig, which could turn to 10 hours logging. Before I drove back because there was no money in the budget for a hotel.
Yes.
And I was on a day rate, but I'd just done 17 hours instead of the 9 hours that I was contracted for. And I know a few of them have. We're 12 hours door to door maximum, and they rarely do that. And if they do, they're paid for all the hours that they work. There's no, you know, there isn't. It's just expected of you.
Yeah. It is.
If we've had to do that, then I've priced it in from start to finish. So yeah, they've then gone out and gone, what do you mean? I'm done. You know, it's 1 o'clock in the afternoon. I've done my 9 hours, and they've had a bit of a life lesson come back to them. But you know, it's not just limited to our industry. That's I think that's across the board.
No, it does. It's just speaking about our industry, I suppose. You know, the driving can sometimes be an extreme thing, really. The driving, especially if you're a few days here and a few days there. You know, you've got to make sure everything's all packed up and all the rest of it, and you have to, you know, travel to a different location, and it's logged, and then there's answering emails from clients. So, and then at some point, going down to McDonald's or wherever you're going to get your fast food, because you know, you might be staying away in a hotel somewhere. So it's definitely can be a tiring but rewarding industry to be in, I think.
It can. I mean, as I say, mine are fairly lucky in the regulations that we have to follow, Michael. So, perfect example for driving. You know, they've been working in London on a weekend. So Friday morning, they're doing a couple of hours logging maybe, and then the rest of their day is driving to London ready to work on Saturday, because they've got to have 12 hours rest before the shift.
Yeah.
And the shift starts at 9 o'clock. So Friday night, they're on expenses from me. All day Saturday they are. Then they stay over Saturday night and they drive back Sunday morning. Yeah. And they're paid, you know, the travel back on a Sunday is paid at double time. You know, it's as fair as a deal as I've ever seen in the industry. And why? Because it's rubbish working on a weekend. I can't make it any better. It's, you know, you're 23 years old and you're giving your weekend up when you want to be on the top. You know, I can charge them, so we could double the margins and just pay them single time, but it's not the right thing to do.
No, they would. I'd imagine they'd leave more, to be honest, wouldn't they? Really, especially on a railway.
I have to compete against everybody else who does it during the day. Yeah. And I have to convince them it's a good idea to do 8 hours working 4.5 hours in a possession at night. And
definitely. Okay, so we kind of went over what you would change in the industry, but what have you seen that sort of made you quite proud of being part of the industry? Is there anything so you think of, inclusion, safety, technology, whatever it is that?
I think, you know, when I try and explain this to them, it was part of the chat I had with them this morning. You know, why did you want to be an engineer? You know, if you're not going to pay attention to detail. That is what we're about. We're supposed to be partly on the spectrum when it comes to details.
Yes,
I like solving problems, you know, and I see it across the industry. If there's, particularly with rail stuff, you know, we built a couple of different rigs because we had dramas.
Yeah.
You know, standard rigs just didn't work for us. And I see people evolving, and I see people changing that have been in business a lot of years. We've got adaptable people who work for us, who learn these new technologies. And that's good. And I also enjoy, as I said earlier, you know, I've got friends within the industry that we've worked with, that we deal with each other fairly with. We'll still compete for work, but if they're really stuck and they pick the phone up to me, I'll help them out all day long. Yeah. And they're the same for us. You know, it's just, and there's not too many other industries, I don't think, where that happens.
No, you see it all the time with drilling crews as well, don't you, on social media, etc. They're missing a bit, or they need something, and some other crews quite happily got the bit, and they can meet up and pass it over to them.
Yeah, I mean, you're perfect. We did some work in Bristol, and you know, me and Eric from Structural Saws, we always have a banter between us. Every time we got a job in Bristol, I love posting it just because it's on Eric's doorstep. And he's always like, that should be our job. I said, well, it should be, but you know, you're just not quite good enough, Eric. So that's why but you know, we were working, and he dropped me a message going, that's only 1.5 miles from our yard. If you need to leave anything in the yard, feel free, mate. You know, and it's things like that, Michael, that make it, you know, and it would be reciprocated. If he was here, I'd be like, right, if you want to dump anything in the yard or you need anything, just give me a shout. We're 1 mile down the road and we can help you out, because things don't always go right. We know they don't. And those favours and those relationships are what make life easier for everybody.
It definitely does. So did you have a kind of a mentor then as you were coming up, I suppose, especially through Bridgeway Consulting? Because I mean, I suppose you would have had mentors to some extent throughout your military career, really.
Yeah, I mean, leadership wise, we have the best examples I think that you ever have. Not all of them, you know, but in general, the weeding out process, you know, and that started right the way at 17 with the Marines. The officers were trained with us. They have to do everything that we do, but then actually on the test, they have to do it faster than we do, because they have to prove that they're worthy of leading the people. And it was slightly different in the army. They weren't trained with us, but their standards had to be higher in theory, you know. And I had some really good examples. I had some poor examples, but in general, most of them were really good. And they were your mentors. You know, you were mentored at every rank. You try and get promoted every 2 to 3 years. If it didn't happen for you on that board, then you just, you know what, you pick your bottom lip up, you go for a beer with your mates, and you think, right, well, 6 months time there'll be another board. Just not, I'm wrapping my tits and I'm leaving. It's just life. So they were cracking mentors, you know, and I had people here that I could pull on for stuff I didn't know. But the difference with this place was, when I came in, I was, and to a certain extent still am, the industry expert for our business. You know, it was almost a hobby before I took over the department. And it was clients, because Bridgeway delivered in other disciplines so well. It was clients saying, could you do this? You know, and that's part of our business ethos. If there's a gap in the market that people want a job doing well, then we'll bring somebody in who knows about that, and we'll build a department around them. But again, there was the other thing with bringing Hugh in and bringing Dom in and bringing John in, was people all that we, you know, as I said before, I'm not an expert in everything. So like, you've got more experience of this, come on. And we have a thing in the office now that if there's a problem, I like people to stop if you're in the office and listen to how that problem gets solved. It's downtime of 5 minutes for 4, 5, 6 people. But in actual fact, that's logged in your mind. That's the best CPD that you can have.
People be glued to actually watching it unfold and be resolved, and can have a contribution there and then. And
you know, I'm very, very, you know, I sit in the middle of my department. I'll sit in the corner, obviously, because sometimes there's stuff on my screen that not everybody wants to see, and it faces, you know, it faces the wall. But I'm there. There's no glass panels around me. And it's the same with the rest of the directors in Bridgeway. We're sat with our teams. There's no separation. There's no point in having experience. I'm not passing it on. I won't be doing this forever. You know, I'm late 40s now. I've got 15 years working. left, and somebody's going to have to take this over.
Mm-hmm. You started training someone up now?
There's always people in the wings. The problem that, no, it's not a problem. But my number 2 in the department is also my other half. So I'm guessing that that when I retire, she'll be about 5 minutes behind me.
Okay, fair enough. Do you have any kind of advice for someone just about to get into the industry, or perhaps they're just about to finish university this year, and they're coming out into the sort of rail or the civil engineering, ground investigation? Do you have any advice for those people?
Yeah, do you know what? Embrace your first few years. This is where you learn. We get specifications now, and I'll get them from consultants, and you can tell who's ever been on site and done the job and who's not.
Okay.
If you've not, you specify a ground up or an air up for me, or you want tartan paint off me, or something else like that, something that's completely not possible. We're having the same arguments at Euston at the moment that we had 5-6 years ago, that somebody's written a scope and said you need a mini rig that could do 55 meters, and we need it done in 8 days with 2 meters head height. Okay. Well, then, wicked. You tell me where I buy one.
Go for it.
You tell me where I buy one, because I've designed a couple of rigs, and I'm not sure where to start on that, if I'm honest. It's and I'm pretty good at this stuff, but I don't know what you're on about. And we kicked that into touch, say 5-6 years ago. It's come back again 2 weeks ago.
Yeah.
And
surfing around again and again.
Yeah. So I'd say to people coming in, look, embrace it, your formative years. And what I say to all of mine, if you work hard, good things happen to you.
Yes.
It's as simple as that. Success should be earned. It's not a right. It's you earn it.
They say the harder you work, the luckier you get, I believe.
I've said exactly the same to one of my neighbours, because he said to me, you've got to admit you had a bit of luck. And I said, it's really odd, Pete. The harder I work, the luckier I seem to get. It was just really, really curious.
Yes. No, that's it. Yeah. Even if I'm not saying you do, but even if someone does get a fat hand up somewhere, you still have to make something of it. It can quickly leave you at any time. I mean, if someone left to know the money, you could quickly waste it and spend it and have nothing from it.
I'd give myself a weekend, I think, unless it's a sizable chunk, and it'd be an amazing weekend. But you know what?
No, that's it. You might buy a house or take a job in the meantime.
That is a worrying thing when somebody tells you bought a house in the morning and you've got a sales receipt in your back pocket and you have no recollection whatsoever.
Wow. Was it a good deal, though? That's the important question.
Yeah, it was, because I was drunk, I was really quite obnoxious with the salespeople. It was a new house bought off plan, and we got like a 25,000 worth of extras from it by me just being my usual charming self.
So this wasn't kind of in the pub written on the back of a piece of paper. This is kind of an official.
No, this was with my ex. It'd been one of the other directors here. It was his 40th birthday, and she'd gone home early after having a couple of glasses of wine, and I stayed out. And then I told her that when she said, what time do you get back in? I said, about 1, and I've rolled in about 5 to 6. So then we went to view a house at 9 o'clock, and I was.
Oh, you just couldn't.
She said, I thought you might still be drunk, because you said to me, you better drive. I gave her the keys, and then fell asleep the whole way there. And then she'd take me to McDonald's in the afternoon when the hangover had kicked in, and I was sat there. And I said, did we buy a house this morning? She sort of looked at me about it. I said, did I dream that? Did we buy a house? And she said, you're joking, man. I said, no. And she said, look in your back pocket. And I had a sales receipt from David Wilson Homes for a brand new house off plan. And I said, I don't even know where this is. Where is it? So I made her take me back to see the show home again and actually where we're moving to. But
yeah.
That's my record for spending money while I'm drunk. If I beat it, I'll be upset with myself.
Yeah, at least you made a central purchase at a house. You can't lose too many ways in buying a house, can you? I don't think. I suppose, is there anything that you would have done differently now that you obviously have a lot more experience? Is there anything looking back in your career that you would have done a little bit differently?
There's a few things, hindsight's always 20/20. And I took a leap of faith leaving a large multinational to come here and start a team, and some of the characters I had to manage were a bit difficult, shall we say. Did I always manage them in the best way? Probably not. I'd say, but one thing I'd say about my work was they know I'm straight up and straight down. They also know I care about them. I can tell you everybody's other halves names. I can tell you the kids' names. I can tell you most of the birthdays are.
Yeah.
But I also know that in my mid-30s, I was far more aggressive than I am now, and I was far quicker to fly off the handle.
Okay.
And if I could have dialed that back a little bit
to
when I actually needed it, as opposed to making it a default, then...
Yeah, I suppose it's like you would have learned, did you learn that in the army to sort of dial it up?
To a certain extent, but also I'd forgotten lessons that we did learn in the army. We're not the Yank army, they go straight full bore straight off. You've got levels of things so situations don't escalate too quickly. And you know what, I think sometimes I just I didn't follow those processes that we had, Michael. I think I went from 0 to 10.
Yeah.
And with hindsight, I'd have dialed that back.
Yeah.
It was just, I mean, you've dealt with drillers, lads are good lads, and as I say to some of my clients, they're brilliant lads, they're brilliant at what they do, they're never going to operate on your brain. And they have a language and they have a behaviour that they expect, and sometimes you have to be a bit of a chameleon and do that. But I also think that I went over the top a few times with hindsight, with age and a bit more maturity now, and I just think probably shouldn't have done that a few times, and I'd change those. Career-wise, if I had my time again, I'd go back and do it all again. It was fun.
Yeah,
it was fun. Just the work. Would I have left at 13? Maybe not. Maybe I was stuck it out for a few months. But that was my wife. Not at the time, not really wanting me to. I'd done the first tour of Afghan, the first tour of Iraq, and I'd been in Bosnia 4 times.
Okay.
Kosovo, Macedonia, and she's like, when's this going to stop?
Yes. Yeah. Which is fair enough, isn't it?
Yeah. She lived a single life pretty much. It was never there.
Yeah. No, definitely. So do you have any sort of burning ambitions what to do with your sort of remaining 15 years in the industry?
Yeah, I mean, when I took this on, I set us out to try and become the biggest independent.
Okay.
That's, to be honest, that's sort of becoming a little bit easier for me because RSK buy everybody else.
Yeah,
but we make too much profit for RSK to buy us, as I told Alan Ryder at the AGS day. He was a bit of a, he'd seen me across the room. It was probably 3-4 years ago. I was talking to Eric and he came across, we've been keeping an eye on you. And I said, yeah, but we'll cost you more than £1. We're not going down the pan. And he said, I've got a big bank balance. No, big overdraft.
Yeah, $1 billion. I think they had got out. Was it a year ago, 6 months ago?
Something like that. So I'd want to stay independent, and I want to carry on doing what we're doing. We could grow bigger. We've got another batch of trainees in. A few years ago we left BDA. There wasn't any value in it. If I'm honest, they've asked us to come back, and they've asked us. We set our own training program up again because this is what we do. We set ourselves up. We're an MVQ centre. We can award the land drilling MVQ ourselves. And I think it's safe to say the guys that have gone through it find it more difficult than they did. The BDH apprenticeship, the first one, out of the 6 people that did it, 5 were mine. And I'm not really sure what we did to the BDA at the time, but when the photos went out and everything, all my logos were photoshopped out.
Oh, were they? So is this
I think maybe.
Is it?
I think it's probably because it wanted a Stegosaurus, was it? So
fair enough. So you left the BDA then? Yeah. We
weren't getting anything out of it, Michael.
You just didn't feel like you're getting any value from what did they charge like a yearly subscription? Was it part of
they do, and it was tripled overnight. When I spoke to somebody off the books about it and said, why has this been tripled? The exact words were, you guys in Nottingham are doing really well now. It's about time you paid your dues.
Yeah.
Sorry, hang on a minute.
This is
going to be broadcast. So I won't give my exact response, but it was quite good.
Okay. All right. Well, we've pretty much come to the end of the podcast, Mark.
No problem.
Thanks very much for your time. Most appreciated.
No problem. Thanks for inviting me.
Yeah, it's really good to have you on and to meet you kind of face to face as well. Give some good advice and some good stories. But yeah, thank you very much. This will be released in a few weeks, and I'll let you know when it's around.